Back for another week, food for thought right here at RotoGrinders. What's going on, Chief Justice 06? How are you?
Nothing much. I am doing good other than my been trying to enter some pick'em slips and underdog thinks I'm in North Carolina. So I'm gonna have to reach out to him about that when we get off this show. I was the hold up for those 5 minutes, folks. I wanted to get these slips in because guess what? If I waited by the time we get off this show, I may not get the same line. So I wanted to get those in just in case. And so we are back. We're headed into week 5. Obviously, this is food for thought. It's a preview show, and we talk about, we do a little bit of review and a little bit of preview, Luch. And I think that's what makes this show so interesting and hopefully palatable for the average fan, and also for the true DFSers, if you will. So we are here, we are back, we are in. Let's roll.
Yeah, consider us the reset button if you're just tuning in. There's some data that's available every Monday. So as we take a look at some things that happened on Sunday and the previous week, we're able to tie some things in. We have a rare Monday where there's 2 Monday night football games. So the week is far from over just yet. Ton of injuries. It's going to be a war of nutrition this season. It seems like we have some big ones we need to talk about, and just another exciting, fantastic week of football. Some teams are continuing to trend one way. Some teams are also throwing us a wrench, maybe with some things that we thought were going to happen based on the first 3 weeks. But we talk about it all the time. It's just a league of small sample sizes, and determining what's real, who's real, and what's sticking is a big deal. And early in the season, I think, is when you can try and get a little creative and take advantage of those things that you believe in. Let me get through these reads real quick, Chief, and then we'll take a look at what's cooking, and we'll talk about some of these injuries and our big takeaways and all of the craziness that happened 24 hours ago. Splash Sports. Hopefully some of you have discovered Splash Sports. The week 4 action continues over at Splash Sports. There's a 5K Monday Night Football tiers contest. Splash is available in 34 states. They lead the way in peer-to-peer fantasy and betting contests. Join the action. Take on the RG experts and the community at splashsports.com/rotogrinders. Use promo code ROTO10 to get a $10 credit after you enter your first contest. Survivor pools are awesome, and that's one of the big areas Splash focuses on. We had our guy, the Commission, early in the season to talk about some Survivor. And odds are plenty of you are probably wiped out by now because, boy, it's been a big year for underdogs, Chief, especially. What was it? 5.5 point underdogs are just, or more, are just crushing it this year. And your Panthers fell just inside that line on Sunday, and we will get to that momentarily. I promise you. Got two more reads real quick. The RG Combo Lite, introducing our new package here at RotoGrinders, gives you the power of simulation for just a fraction of the price of our other tools. Competitors charge hundreds a month for their sim products. Combo Lite is just $39.99. It includes our SimLabs lineup building tool, plus content from some of your favorite DFS analysts. Listen, Combo Lite doesn't limit you to one sport. MLB, NFL, NBA, and PGA, right at your fingertips. Pretty cost-effective solution there as well. And finally, congratulations to Rory Doheny. Took down our Week 4 Listener League. Awesome stuff. We'll bring up your lineup momentarily and give you some kudos. But again, congrats to Rory, and hit up anybody here at RG, and you'll get hooked up with a free month of RG Combo Premium. It looks like Rory was cooking Sunday, Chief. Who was absolutely on fire on Sunday? What stuck out to you the most?
I think if you're talking about teams that were on fire or have been on fire, we got to go with a team that's undefeated, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I know, the score on that game ended up being, 31 to 29, and I get it. But like the Vikings came out again, Luch, and just got ahead of the competition, right? I mean, you blinked and it was 21-0, I think it was. It may have even been 28-0 at one point. In fact, I think it was 28-0 at one point in this game. Now, I know the Packers settled in, kind of came back. I get it. But once again, the Vikings come out here and get the job done with Sam Darnold. And they get it done without a monster game from Justin Jefferson. I mean, they're just getting contributions from all over the place. And so, the Vikings, in terms of their team, I mean, at this point, they're leading the division, obviously, because they're undefeated. One of the few remaining undefeated teams in the league. The Steelers obviously fell off against the Colts, and maybe we'll talk about that game. The Chiefs continue to be undefeated and, kind of squeak by there. And the Bills have gone down now, and the Seahawks play tonight. So, they're, in terms of teams that are undefeated, I mean, they're slowly falling by the wayside. And so any team that can continue, Luch, to have a 0 in the L column as we get into week 5, I have to say that that's a team that's continuing to cook. And so that's the Minnesota Vikings for me.
Well, I want to tip my cap just in terms of a flag you planted, or I don't know if it was a hot take you had. Maybe it was on Crunch Time yesterday. I think you called it a yucky click, and maybe it was. But do you know who was the air yard market share leader yesterday amongst receivers? I'll just tell you. It was a miserable game, and there weren't a ton of yards. But your boy Cortland Sutton led the NFL with 66% of his team's air yard share.
I told you. It's going to come together at some point. At some point, this game, he's going to just destroy a slate. He's just getting too. Anyway, the Broncos did not look good yesterday, but neither did the Jets. But I know that was a sidebar conversation. So thank you. And I did get that one right. I took him over 6 targets. I mean, man, did he not disappoint? I think he ended with 9 or 10 or something like that. But either way, we're good.
Well, that counts as cooking. I mean, he had every opportunity to cook a 3-course meal. Just some weather and just a crap game environment.
Hey, okay, sidebar on that. Do you at one point, Bo Nix had thrown 15 passes for -7 yards.
It's crazy.
This is not an exaggeration. I mean, at one point in the game, and in fact, I think the game was either 6-0 or 6-3. It was still like super tight. That's a stat line I'll never forget. Has thrown the ball 15 times for -7 yards. That was yesterday's Denver Broncos, who won by 1 point, by the way.
Right. And I'm just looking at the highest scoring players from yesterday. Not on the main slate, but Derrick Henry still got that burst. And man, did Baltimore exploit Buffalo? Both sides of the ball yesterday. No team is perfect in this league. And just a thorough ass kicking, if you will, last night on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, well, that was a wire-to-wire win. So, I mean, obviously, they opened up the game with Derrick Henry and Luch. I had to replay it because they said he didn't get touched. Then I watched the replay. And I said, oh, my gosh. No one touched him 87 yards. I mean, he hit the gap, caught a block, got outside, and then he's off to the races, Luch, and is outrunning everyone. So that's the first play of the game. And this is the game where, and obviously, Luch, I had some Zay Flowers shares. Zay Flowers had 2 targets, 1 catch for 10 yards, and they won this game like handedly. Justice Hill was yesterday's secondary MVP, if you will, just obliterating them through the air. And I mean, Buffalo looked like how I thought they would look week 1. To be honest with you. And I know I've been higher on the Arizona Cardinals than most people. And wow, did they get their butt kicked yesterday? Maybe we head there after this game. But Buffalo, I feel like had been playing a little bit above their heads. And once again, Luch, here's the deal. And here was my fear for Buffalo. When you ask Josh Allen to have to put on the cape, when he has to start putting on the cape every game, I think they're in trouble. Because now, look, once again, do I like Josh Allen as a quarterback? Yeah, I mean, clearly Josh Allen's one of the better quarterbacks in the league. But when he's got to put on the cape against good defenses, I think that's when this team is going to struggle the most, Luke, because he has to force the issue a bit, right? They're trying to get the ball moving. They just didn't have it yesterday, and Baltimore did, and Baltimore's going to continue to improve throughout the season as long as they don't, as long as the injury bug doesn't bite them too bad. And so clearly Baltimore, I feel like is the better team despite their record.
Yeah, and Buffalo's still one of the top half teams of the AFC, and we talked about. I mean, everyone's talked about they've been depleted defensively, losing Matt Milano and company. We're all wondering who was the number one receiver going to be, who's going to take over this offense, and I think everybody wanted it to be Dalton Kincaid, but it's kind of just the ball's getting spread out, which is fine. Like I've been very impressed with Josh Allen's decision making this year, but
the game got away from them yesterday.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I think Joe Brady wants to call a controlled game. And that's first of all, let me say this, Luch. That's almost every offensive coordinator in the league, right? Every offensive coordinator wants to be able to get out fast, get out early, and then call a controlled game to the end. I think every offensive coordinator would like to do that. But the difference is when the deck is stacked against you, and now you've got to start firing, right? Like, are you able to get it done offensively, and then can your defense slow the other team down? And Josh Allen doesn't play defense. And yesterday, the defense could not slow down the Ravens at all. And the game just spiraled and got out of hand quickly.
I mean, maybe we're all seeing a clearer picture of some things happening. I mean, small sample size every year. Buffalo edged out the Cardinals in week 1. The Cardinals have been pretty miserable ever since that. I mean, for the most part, just sputtering out completely in the second half of games. I mean, they walloped the Jaguars, who had a ton of issues, and they took care of the Dolphins, who have some of their own problems, and they've had Miami's number for years now. So, I mean, don't look now, but next week they have a battle, a showdown, an AFC gauntlet game against Houston coming up, and many people tabbed Houston as ones who could just dominate the AFC. But I tell you what, the Jaguars damn well had that game in hand until super late in the fourth quarter against Houston yesterday. So although it's another L on paper and everyone wants Doug Peterson out, like, credit to the Jaguars for getting destroyed, coming back against their biggest division rival this season and coming up short. But I mean, they did respond yesterday, Chief.
Yeah, they did. I'm going to go back to Buffalo temporarily. Let me say this. Here may be Buffalo's saving grace. Who's going to be better than them in this division by the time the season ends? And it might not actually be the Jets. That's the issue. Like, Buffalo very well could get in, like how the NFC South teams have been getting in years past, Luke. They just may need to be better than everyone in their division. And right now, they clearly have the best quarterback in the division. And I think that's where we are with Buffalo. So while Buffalo may not be as good as they looked over the past couple of weeks, I think they win this division unless the Jets figure something out. I.e., it has Aaron Rodgers made that big of a difference? Doesn't look like it so far. I've been saying this for years, but everyone thinks I'm crazy. But has he moved the needle? No. The answer is no. Aaron Rodgers has not moved the needle for the Jets at all. At all might be a stretch. But my point is, Luce, they don't look better than last year on offense, right? They're supposed to look way better than this, and they don't. They scored 9 points yesterday against Denver. Shout out to Denver's defense. But at any rate, that's my Aaron Rodgers rant for this particular episode. I will let that go, and I'll let anyone decide that they want to challenge me on this, and I'll just point them to the film. My point is, I think Buffalo is the best team in the division until someone proves me wrong. Speaking of Arizona, how about the Commanders and what they've done with Jaden Daniels? And now everybody's thinking Jaden Daniels is, this year's CJ Stroud, if you will, a rookie quarterback that can come in and get the job done. Yesterday, the game ball went to Cliff Kingsbury. Gave it to him, obviously, for being able to stick it to his old team. Here's the thing. Here's my thing, Luch. If the Commanders go in here and win by 1 point, last second field goal, okay, whatever. Like, good win, fun game. This score is 42-14 on yesterday.
Yeah.
The week before, they put a beat down on the Bengals. Like, what this if the Commanders come out coming up here, they have a matchup with the Browns at home, and really they should beat the Browns. If we start to see some mojo here, Luch, where they kind of, when I say run away with it, I'm saying if they're anywhere near 28-14, 31-17, 31-10, something like that, then shout out to the Commanders for making the right head coaching hire in Dan Quinn. For all intents and purposes, Luch, for the lackluster performance that Dan Quinn had as a defensive coordinator his last season in Dallas, let's go back to when he was actually a head coach. Like, Dan Quinn was a good head coach, and it just kind of spiraled on him. But, hey, it may have been the right hire to bring him in, and obviously getting Cliff Kingsbury, who everybody's calling the quarterback whisperer, in college at least, for good reason. This may be a match made in heaven for this organization that seems to have some new life with a young quarterback that's come in and helped them push this organization forward, at least through the first 4 weeks.
I agree. And I think that's, keeping a level head about it is big, because I love what Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels have done. I'm excited to see Daniels grow. I think he's going to be and is a good quarterback already. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. But when you throw in context, they beat the Giants and the Commanders by a combined 8 points. A win's a win. The win's a win crowd. Everything, the energy, the atmosphere, everything he's bringing this organization is amazing, right? And then you beat down the Cardinals on the road across the country, which was impressive. But unfortunately for us and our Cardinals tickets after the first week, maybe we flopped on that one a little bit. They've been miserable. They've been inconsistent. They can't play more than a quarter. I am very excited to see Cleveland and a more formidable defense come into town. And then I want to see them perform against the Ravens. That's the first real test. I mean, listen, rookie quarterback coming in, every game's a test, and he's been so poised. He's been fantastic. But them being NFC East contenders is a different conversation, at least for now. But you look around the NFC East.
I don't know, though. The problem is the Cowboys and the Eagles don't look like they're ready to play football week to week.
All I'm saying is let's take it 1 week at a time. But when you look around their division, you scratch your head about the Cowboys. You scratch your head about the Giants. You don't know about the Eagles. So let me see these next 2 weeks. And even if they lose both games and they're just well-played games, I'll buy in for sure. But speaking of the Eagles, producer Steve, by the way, who's keeping an eye on the Mets game, who have taken the lead allegedly in this doubleheader.
I don't want to hear this blasphemy.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. I thought this was a really interesting Dan Orlovsky clip because, listen, I'm in the Northeast here. I'm in Pennsylvania. Sometimes things just don't look good. But when a pro quarterback can look at the tape.
Not on Get Up this morning or First Take because I had Monday Night Football down. Dolphins, Titans tonight, 7:15. Just watch the Eagles tape. It's bad. When it comes to defensively, like watching a team tackle, watching a team play with elite effort, watching a team run to the football, it's bad. All Tampa did to start the game was throw perimeter screens. Baker just goes right down the field. Perimeter screen, perimeter screen, perimeter screen. 10 yards, 12 yards, 10 yards. It is bad watching that tape. And then offensively, the bright spot is safe.
Thanks, Steve. So about the Eagles, Chief, I mean, of who was cooking? Baker Mayfield, 2% owned on Sunday. And that passing game, who had a bad couple of weeks, Mike Evans, who has really having a really quiet start to 2024, don't miss a beat and lay a whooping on Philly, Chief.
Luch, I'm going to parlay that. This is going to be a two-pronged statement. And you were on, and I'm so glad you were on Crunch Time with myself and Christy yesterday, because otherwise it may not have had the same impact. Luch, you were on. Me and Christy were talking about this, and what did we say? When everybody zigs, you can zag. Mike Evans wasn't going to be dead forever. Travis Kelce wasn't going to be dead forever, right? And yeah, I know Rashee Rice going down definitely probably helped Kelce, pick up a lot more targets in that game. But what did we say on Crunch Time yesterday? For everybody that thought that Mike Evans was just falling off of a cliff, what does he do, Luch? Comes out and just nukes the slate right along with Baker Mayfield, right? And the same thing for Kelce. So, sometimes, Luch, like, you just got to give these guys some time. Here's something else that I think we maybe don't talk about as much. The starters don't play nearly as many preseason games as they used to. So week 1 is more like the preseason for some of these guys, Luch. But they're being expected to play a full game. Same thing for week 2 and 3. And so it might take a little minute for some of these players to get some reps under their belts. So I mean, look, you talk about it with the Eagles. They absolutely got hammered yesterday. And shout out to the Buccaneers for being able to bring this thing home. I mean, you want to talk about who's cooking? The Eagles got cooked. I mean, it was chicken stew down there in Tampa Bay. I mean, they brought the walkout. I mean, they were getting cooked. I mean, it was insane, Luke. So and they never really relinquished control of the game. So they started out hot and they rode this thing to the finish line, as evidenced, Luke, by the final score, 33-16. Eagles die, because that's what happened yesterday. They got shot right out of the air, and it was all due to those cannons down there in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, Orlovsky said it well. It was ugly. There are some issues everywhere defensively. There's no pressure. The linebackers, outside of a couple of Zach Bond cameos, can't tackle. The secondary just looks like it's in disarray. And, man, we gave Vic Fangio a lot of props the previous week, but I don't know. It might not matter who's calling the plays. If the personnel is not meshing, it might not matter. It might not matter if it's Dan Quinn, Legion of Boom.
Well, Luke,
it might not matter.
Let's talk about how all of this fits into DFS. I'm feeling real DFS-y right now. Let's talk about how this all fits into DFS, right? So I'm going to take this to the Buccaneers game and kind of their style of play and how they play. You heard Dan Orlovsky talk about what he saw on the film, on the tape. And then what you also saw, and I'm gonna say it this way, you also saw an Eagles offense that was deprived of their 2 main wide receiver weapons, right? So I don't want to
for sure
overblow it. I don't want to overblow it. I do think if Devontae Smith and AJ Brown played in this game yesterday, it's way more competitive, right? So let me just put that out there. I think that's a fair assessment. But listen to what Dan Orlovsky was talking about. He wasn't talking about Jalen Hurts. He was talking about defense. Like, this is what he was bringing up. He didn't say Jalen Hurts was bad. He said the defense was a disaster. Do you get up? Like Luch, he basically said they screened their way to 7 points in their first drive. That's basically what he said. Luch, I watch high school football down here in South Carolina. That's high school football stuff, Luch. Throw it out, run up, out of bounds, tackle, whatever. Come up to the line, quick hit again, up, pick up chunk plays. At some point, the defense had to make some adjustments. But I said I was bringing this into a DFS. I want to bring this up for DFS. What if I told you, Lucha, this defense is not going to improve? When they get their weapons back after the bye week, the Eagles might be some of the best plays on the slate, because they may very well be playing from behind most games, which means Jalen Hurts is going to get off. Saquon's going to get off. A.J. Brown's going to have to get off. Devontae Smith is going to have to get off. Dallas Goedert. And I know you can't play all of those guys together every week, but my point, Luch, is this. if you target bad defenses in DFS, especially if there's a good offense on the other side, to me, that is such a good blend of like DFS fantasy goodness. You give it, and that's very simple. Like, right? That's very simple. On paper, you target bad defense. It's kind of like baseball. In baseball DFS, you want to target bad pitchers because if you keep targeting bad pitchers, eventually the runs are going to come, right? Well, if you keep targeting bad defenses, the points will come. Who do we think are strolling out bad defenses right now, Luke? Like who are those teams? Who are those teams? Well, the Eagles may be one. The Patriots may in fact be one. And I know that was San Francisco, but the Patriots are giving up points. We feel like the Rams are behind the 8 ball in terms of bad teams defensively. Could the Bills, in fact, be behind the 8 ball? Maybe. The Browns, to me, Luke, seem to be behind the 8 ball defensively, despite the fact that they're supposed to be really good. When I look at the Cleveland Browns this season, and I get it, like, they open up the season here, Luke. They lost 21-15 to the Giants. The Giants aren't a good football team. They lost 20-16 to the Raiders. I don't consider the Raiders a juggernaut football team, and they beat the Jaguars by 5 points. Luch, what am I saying here? And once again, this is about DFS. Like, let's not let the previous seasons cloud our judgment here. The Eagles, the Browns, the Rams, these may not be good football teams on the defensive side, and we need to start adding that into the equation for our DFS lineups. I, for one, will be targeting these teams. Ultimate mute, Luch. Ultimate mute.
Sorry, my Slack was going crazy, and I didn't want everybody to hear that pencil sound going.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, and getting the weapons back is huge. I mean, that Commanders game could have went crazy if Washington had any kind of if Arizona had any kind of competency outside of their first drive yesterday. And we can't sit here, as much as we praise Washington and the improvements they've made, we can't sit here and say their defense is good. In fact, at least the chart I'm looking at that was updated yesterday, it looks like they are dead last in EPA per play defensively still.
Yeah, and we need to keep targeting them also. They're getting targeted.
Yeah. And so you're exactly right. And Philly is 23rd, meaning bad in defensive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, and you look at the Eagles' schedule, and context matters. And I'm tying this in because I really feel for the Saints as well. But the Eagles squeaked by the Saints. Oh, wow.
And Atlanta squeaked by the Saints yesterday.
And people are saying, well, the defense only gave up 12 points. But small sample size. Maybe we're too quick to pull the trigger on Clint Kubiak can save anybody, because the Saints oftentimes have looked like the Saints ever since their early season explosion.
Well, but Luch, so see, here's the thing though. The Saints scored 24 points yesterday. We're up in that game with 1 minute left. They were winning 24-23. The defense has to stop someone. Now, granted, they did have a pass interference call on Darnell Mooney down the field, right? I mean, he just so that's pretty much what got the Falcons a lot closer to field goal range. You get what I'm saying, Luke? So once again, I'm not going to blame the Saints offense when they put up 24 points and we're winning with a minute left in the game. Like, the defense has to stop somebody. And once again, an L is an L is an L. Shout out to the Falcons, who I did talk about, Luch, on Crunch Time yesterday. I talked about that game and the fact that I do think they're getting better as Kirk Cousins gets more healthy and they get more comfortable. Like you saw Drake London, what's happening? It keeps emerging as the alpha. And I know I loved Darnell Mooney yesterday, and for whatever reason, they just gave Ray McLeod all the Darnell Mooney targets in the first half, and then peppered Mooney in the second half. But my larger point is this, Luke. I still think the Saints are better than people think. And now we've got a run for this division between them and the Falcons and the Buccaneers. And it's going to get interesting down the stretch.
I I feel for the Saints. Atlanta didn't score an offensive touchdown. They had 2 defensive touchdowns and 4 field goals. So, week to week league, of course, whatever cliche garbage you want me to say at this point. But I'm worried about that Atlanta offense a little bit. Still, I'm ready to give up on Kyle Pitts. Let's continue that discussion. We talked about who was cooking. It's been a brutal year for tight ends. Production, injuries. Yeah, I mean, you might want to get the smoke alarm going on this GIF here, producer Steve, because the kitchen might have already burned down. Yesterday on Crunch Time, we talked about Travis Kelce. Are you worried? And Mike Evans. Are you worried? Are they washed up? Are they done? Is it play calling? Is it scheme? Is it injuries? Is it game script? Like, how many excuses can we make for certain guys before we need to start making some stands on them? Kyle Pitts, every year, he's got Kirk Cousins. Arthur Smith's gone. Kyle Pitts, are you out on Kyle Pitts yet? Mark Andrews, are you out on Mark Andrews yet? I am extremely concerned about both of these guys for the rest of the season. I guess, Luch, it's easy to say now in hindsight, now that Travis Kelce, by process of elimination, finally got some freaking volume yesterday. Nobody's left. But Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, Luch. I'm going to parlay this into something you talked about, and this is fully ballooned around DFS. Like, outside of a few splashes, so like, and what I'm saying is Isaiah Likely had a splash week 1, but that wasn't really on like the main slate, right? So Isaiah Likely had a big splash week 1. And then, we saw some consistency with McBride, but obviously McBride was injured. So McBride has been like the consistent one where it feels like he's going to get you 10 to 15 points a game. And then maybe that upside shows when he gets in the box for a touchdown, right? And then we saw Brock Bowers first couple weeks, pick up some nice targets and have some nice performances. And I'm trying to think. I think we maybe had, one other week where a tight end really kind of nuked the slate. But my larger point is, have any tight ends really just destroyed a main slate? And it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's, so are we in a position now? And let me say this also, put that in before I continue. Rashee Rice going down may impact Travis Kelce going forward. So Travis Kelce may return to, 20 fantasy points a game. You know what I'm saying, Luch? Like, the target should be up. He's going to be involved. I'm assuming they're going to find ways to get Xavier Worthy the ball a little bit more. Like, Patrick Mahomes is going to have to develop that trust. But for all intents and purposes, I'm with you. Tight end has been a down position for DFS this season. And so I don't think we need to give up on the big names. And I don't think we need to give up on Kyle Pitts. But I think tempering our expectations, and Kyle Pitts' price is going to continue to drop. So that's the other thing too, right? Like, at some point, Kyle Pitts is going to be 3,800, Luch. And now he's in that range where he's just the same price as any other marginal tight end. You know what I mean? Like, these guys' prices are going to have to come down. We might as well price all the tight ends like defenses at this point, because some of the defenses are outscoring the tight ends on the season. Some, not all.
I got news for you, buddy. Kyle Pitts is a marginal tight end. I'm looking at separation score on fantasy points. He is in the bottom third of the league in separation score. For a guy of his size, that is lined up in the slot and gets favorable matchups. He's not winning routes. You look at Atlanta, I mean, tip of the cap to Kirk Cousins because he's not really locking in on anybody.
Well,
Drake London
is starting to become his guy. I think Drake had 11, 12 targets yesterday, 9 or 10 the week before that. Like, it's slowly but surely coming along.
26% target share for the year. That's just fine. 37% air yard share. You love to hear that. But you've been talking about Darnell Mooney, and of course he didn't pop yesterday. But if it wasn't for him, that offense would be in trouble. He's a key cog to what they need on the outside because Mr. Kyle Pitts, generational tight end prospect, can't win a route to save his life. And the volume's not there. 10% target share. He's not even getting air yards. I mean, 13% of the team's air yards. I don't know. I'm okay on Kyle Pitts. And now talk to me about Mark Andrews, because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening, watching, who've invested in these guys. Best ball season long in the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds this year. What's your concern level with Mark Andrews opposed to Kyle Pitts? I mean, my thoughts is he was never a super volume guy, right? That offense with Lamar Jackson.
But he got good targets downfield, 10, 15 yards, that type of stuff, which helped him.
But now you bring in one of the highest touchdown equity running backs in NFL history in Derrick Henry. And instead of saying, well, let's look for Mark Andrews, we're just going to bulldoze it inside the 5 with Derrick Henry. So you're also getting less design stuff where it matters inside the 10. And I don't have numbers in front of me. It just from watching the Ravens pretty much every week, it's kind of making a little bit of sense here now. And that drop pass when he was wide open just went through my soul yesterday. I didn't really invest in Mark Andrews, but I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, that sums it up.
Well, the other thing, too, is because of the Derrick Henry effect, Mark Andrews has been doing a lot more blocking.
Right.
Like,
of course.
I mean, he's absolutely, and they even talked about it on the broadcast yesterday, just, the fact that, Mark Andrews is, I mean, he's really been doing a lot of blocking this season. And I do think there are opportunities when that will open up, right, Luch? Like there are opportunities where he'll probably pop for a game. But I think the consistency, and that's what I think we're missing, Luch, from some of these bigger names. Andrews, Kelsey. We're missing the consistency at the tight end position where you could count on these guys for 15 points. We just don't have that right now outside of, really Trey McBride, who was hurt last week, obviously. But I think for the tight end position in terms of DFS, at this rate, Luch, you just go down, take the cheap guy that you think is going to get you some points, and you keep building around this year in DFS, the 5K receiver, the 6K receiver. That's where your money's been made, right? Like the 5 and 6K receivers have really carried the lineups. Why? Tyreek, no Tua. So even though he's been priced up, hasn't really popped yet this season like that. Justin Jefferson, obviously, dealing with Darnold, they've been ahead in a lot of these games. So he hasn't had to get extremely high volume. He's been very efficient, picking up touchdowns and stuff like that. But, overall, and Justin Jefferson is a guy that I feel like the volume will get there. But if the Vikings keep taking off like this, they don't have a reason to keep pushing the ball down the field in the third quarter, right? And they will meet their match. Don't get me wrong. They will meet their match. I feel like one of the safer wide receivers has been Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's playing tonight. He's kept pretty consistent volume outside of the first week. I think when everybody thought Jameson Williams was taking his number one wide receiver role, pump the brakes, folks. They paid Amon-Ra a lot of money to play in a Lions uniform. Trust me, Jameson Williams is not the guy. He is the number 2. So, I'm saying that Devontae Adams is hurt. Cooper Kupp is down. Garrett Wilson does not look like a number 1 receiver out there with Aaron Rodgers. Michael Pittman, outside of yesterday's explosion, hasn't really been that great. Deontay Johnson is probably going to be closer to a number 1 than some of these other guys as long as Andy Dalton is at the helm. Obviously, Neighbors is a true number 1, but he's been what? He's been at 6, 5, and 6K range the first couple of weeks. We'll have to make sure he's good. I think that was a concussion. So he comes back. He's probably a true number 1. What are we saying here, Luch? CeeDee Lamb. He's their number 1 receiver, but he hasn't really had the massive target share, right, that we thought he was going to have, 11, 12, 13, 14 targets in some of these games. He's barely eclipsing 10. You see what I'm saying, Luch? So if you look at that from a DFS perspective, this is why the 6K receivers are continuing to carry lineups, 5, 6K, and the expensive running backs have helped. So yeah, it's just, I think there's a paradigm shift in DFS in lineup construction. And hopefully we're on the right side of it. Now, I know it's fluid. It's going to evolve as the season goes along. Pricing will catch up, so forth and so on. But just kind of looking at it, I think it's an important factor of what we're building in terms of lineup construction right now.
One more Mark Andrews caveat here. 2 straight slaughter positive game scripts. So I just said, are we making excuses for these guys? And one of those things were game script. The most routes anyone ran on Baltimore yesterday was 15, and that was Zay Flowers. Isaiah likely ran 10, and Mark Andrews ran just 6. Now, like you said, he's been a big blocker. They had no reason to pass the ball after halftime at all. Previous week against Dallas, just another slaughter for almost the whole game. Of course, Dallas caught up at the end in a big way, but you look at the last 2 weeks, and Mark Andrews has ran 10 total routes compared to 15 from Likely, 30 from Zay Flowers. You're just not getting the opportunities that you were. And, despite the slaughtered game scripts, who says even in a neutral one that's going to change? I mean, even if it, shifts, if there's a little positive regression in that regard, if you will, or whatever it is, they finally get a couple of positive game scripts. You're not as likely, I didn't even mean that as a stupid pun, to get those high equity targets inside the 5 anymore, because Andrews has suddenly fell to 3rd in the pecking order in red zone volume. One being Henry, 2 being Lamar himself.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. I mean, if you get it inside the 5 with that team, the way it's constructed, what reason do you have to throw until 3rd down? Unless it's like, a bootleg play action or some type. And guess what? They ran something similar to that last night. And guess who the touchdown went to? Derrick Henry. That's who it went to. That's the way this team is constructed now. And I think it's all about sending a message, right, Luch? You don't bring in Derrick Henry to not hand him the football inside the 5 or get him involved. And as long as they fall anywhere near, that down in distance, you have to think it's King Henry time.
You know what, Chief? I mean, I'm trying to bring up the numbers now, though, but we've seen them in a slight negative game script in week 1. And
it was the Isaiah Likely show.
It was, but
Mark
Andrews did run 36 routes that game. 69% of routes. Barely any targets, no air yards. So one of these weeks he's going to be 2-3%, and they're going to be in a negative game script that nobody saw coming. They're going to get like the Bills treatment from last night.
What about the Raiders game? What about the Raiders game?
Man, you're right. Since I'm here.
And listen, shout out to our producer Steve for being a man of the people, being such a good sport about this. Braves 7-6. Thank you, because here's what Steve knows. Steve knows we're both, working right now, and we can't actually watch this game. And I turned my TV off. Lucci heard me before this. I said, I got to turn my TV off. I turned it off on purpose because if I got locked up into that, I was going to be distracted from the people. If you want to know how much I love you, listeners, I love you enough to not watch, even have the Braves game on in the background, knowing that it would distract me from the food for thought task at hand.
Anyway, Andrews was fine week 2 from a route participation standpoint. So it's,
how many targets though, Luch? How many targets?
Oh, I already got off that page. I don't know.
Oh, I can pull it up. I can pull up. Don't you worry, Luch. I always have this stuff.
A lot of Mark Andrews time on Food for Thought this week.
Available because I never know.
The Chief is breaking up a little bit here.
Maybe I don't have it.
So I'm assuming that the hamster on the wheel is running too fast for your internet right now. If you're bringing up like 15 tabs on your browser, we'll give him a minute to catch his breath. But it's just going to be forever talked about until Andrews finally has that one game, and we'll see if we finally get it. There you are, Chief.
Yeah, man. I don't know my site that I use to pull up all these weird stats did not want to cooperate with our stream today. I'm not going to expose that particular site, but man, I like to have that site ready to go, and it was just sitting there spinning. I said, "Oh, it's probably going to crash me out for a second." But we're good. Steve, nothing's wrong. Don't worry. It's all good. It was just that site. I went ahead and closed it, and we will continue on.
Andrew's had 5 targets week 2, by the way. FYI. Some food for thought for you. But
Gotcha.
Just to kind of look back, tie some more things in here before we start our look ahead, and we can talk some Monday Night Football as well. You mentioned
Oh, yeah, I'm ready
Rice,
for look ahead this week. I am ready for look ahead.
Rashee Rice, brutal. The Chiefs are probably going to be active and looking to acquire somebody before the trade deadline.
Who do you think it should be? Let's talk about that.
There's oh man, that's a good one. I don't know.
So clearly,
how about that?
So let's talk through it real quick. So they're gonna have to, if they want to get another like number 1 guy, they're gonna have to trade for someone, right? Because signing someone off the street, that's just not. I don't think that's happening. Who do you think is most disgruntled in the league right now?
Davante Adams.
Clearly. Like he's legit. He's got to be the most disgruntled. Do they have the money to get him? That's the question, Luch. Because if they have the money, I think they can pull it off. Now, I'm not sure if they're going to have to get an exception because Hollywood Brown, right, was basically done before the season started. So they might be able to get some sort of an exception to try to go get him. Like if he's really hurt, you know what I mean? But the other thing is, if they bring that money on the books, like how are they going to be able to get this done long term, right? How does this fit into their long-term plan? So I do think Davante's the most disgruntled. I feel like he needs to be the first call they make. If they can make it work with the money. Like that would be Davante Adams would probably feel like he was in heaven, to be honest with you. Like if the Chiefs got Davante Adams, I think everybody in the world would feel like they're pretty much Super Bowl bound because now they just replaced Rashee Rice with the one guy that's been able to, have a massive target share and be incredibly productive over the past few years. Now, obviously, not as productive with the Raiders because he's had poor quarterback play. This would be the best quarterback he's had since a prime Aaron Rodgers. And I think this could be a match made in heaven for him and the organization if they can get it done.
Amari Cooper's got a friendly contract. I'm just saying.
No, listen, these are the names, Luch, right? Like these are the guys. D-Hop, Amari Cooper. Well, stuff. I'm mentioning Diggs because Diggs was another one that was a little disgruntled. He's already gone to Houston now. Remember Denver was looking to unload their wide receiver room last year. Do you think they could go after a Sutton? You see, this is what it's going to take, I think, for them to rebound. Because clearly Xavier Worthy's not ready to be a number 1. But I think they're going to have to go and get somebody, Luce. I think they're going to have to go get somebody.
My problem with Sutton and D-Hop is that you have 2 young quarterbacks who new, at least for Tennessee. Sean Payton's kind of new, but the regime wants to fairly evaluate these quarterbacks, at least for the season. And we talked about Will Levis. Like going to Mason Rudolph does nothing long-term for that franchise. They can't take assets from Will Levis to get a fair shake out of things. They'll be fine. They have a ton of cap space. Same kind of discussion for, Bo Nix in Denver. We're coming off a win now. I think it would have been really, really interesting and fun, not for Bengals fans, if Cincy would have lost that game, because we have 2 guys on the outside who are studs who have no contract resolution. Higgins doesn't carry any financial baggage with him.
T. Higgins may be another one, Luch.
T. Higgins
that's a good one.
Would hurt my soul and probably the rest of the AFC's soul if T. Higgins landed in Kansas City.
Listen, I don't think they're willing to let Chase go. Higgins, they might.
Yes, they might. I wouldn't be surprised.
Higgins, they might. Kansas City is going to have to start making some calls, though. And this is a good topic.
Higgins would be the easiest in terms of financial complexity because there really isn't any. And either you rent him for this year or you try to get something done if you're Kansas City. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. Maybe it's a hot take, but you also look, the Bengals invested draft equity in Yoshi, who's been pretty good, and Jermaine Burton within the last year. They've invested pretty high draft capital in Yoshi and Burton. So they're prepared to lose at least one of them. And right now, they're going to get a deal done with one of them. And I'm with you. I think they'll figure it out with Chase. But if you're Kansas City, I think you probably already called Cincinnati. I really do. And maybe that's a hot take, and it is what it is. But we had some fun on this at the end of last season where we were talking Justin Fields. And my last like takeaway / what's cooking is that Pittsburgh Indy game. Of course, Anthony Richardson, hip pointer. Don't know if we'll ever see this guy for a full season. It's been a big concern throughout his whole entire career. Barely played any college football. Couldn't make. Well, he played 3 or 4 active games last year and missed a handful of them. And I hope the kid figures it out. But maybe he'll miss another week. Maybe he misses some time. Guess who stepped right in and made Michael Pittman a fantasy asset in a snap of a finger? It was Joe Flacco. And you mentioned Pittman. All I'm saying is, if Flacco continues to be the guy at quarterback for a week, for 2 weeks, for whatever it takes Anthony Richardson to get right, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, hopefully A.D. Mitchell, because this guy is just getting such massive separation, no one can throw him the freaking football, are squarely in the tournament pool for me. Pittsburgh lost the game, Chief. Justin Fields was cooking. George Pickens was cooking. I got that right at least. Najee Harris sold me, but he had a terrible game strip. But kind of an interesting game for fantasy purposes. Pittsburgh, some tournament winners with Justin Fields. And moving forward, I'm extremely interested in these Colts if Anthony Richardson misses time, which is so backwards to say, but it's the truth.
Well, yeah, old man Joe Flacco is going to be pushing the ball down the field. Are we hopping into preview yet? Because speaking of those Colts, they are headed to your Titans after this Monday night game, which we have, Luke. Let's talk a little bit of Monday night in our preview since we're here. I think the most interesting game, obviously, is Seahawks-Lions. We've got an undefeated Seahawks team headed to Ford Field, where Detroit's still fine, right? Sorry, somebody said Aaron Smith said the Mets-Braves game one has been great drama and may outscore Jets-Broncos. That is incredible timing, Aaron. You win the post of the day. You win. But Seahawks-Lions, obviously, we think is the game to be at, Luch, in terms of all the pieces coming together. Both sides are relatively healthy, right? Like neither side has mentioned too many starters. I know Kenneth Walker's just getting back, but so we feel like this game is going to be most competitive. And I think the general sentiment is the Titans-Dolphins game is going to be semi-yucky. But I don't know if I believe that, Luch. And I think we talked about it a little bit before the show. I actually think Huntley makes the Dolphins offense reasonable. I think the difference between him and Skylar Thompson is enough to where this Dolphins offense can get a little closer to what it looked like with Tua. And what I mean is just scoring. I'm not saying this offense is going to flow like it did with Tua, because clearly Tua was had been there. Clearly Tua was the guy who was going to push the ball down the field. But I think Huntley is going to be able to do something similar. I think to me, this is the equivalent of Andy Dalton stepping into the role after Bryce Young. You get competent quarterback play. Huntley is a guy that does still have some legs, Luch. We're expecting him to not have too many turnovers, right? We're expecting him to be able to move the ball. If you can move the ball, you can score some points. Tennessee Titans defense, I never write them off, right? Like their defense has just been ravaged by injuries year after year after year. But they tend to keep studs on the front line. So I'm not saying this is going to be an easy game. I'm saying I think the Dolphins game is more competitive, and from a DFS standpoint, on a 2-gamer, I think being able to get pieces from this game, it's more likely you're going to win the big money with pieces from this game than the Lions-Seahawks game, because most people already know the play pieces from the Lions-Seahawks. But no one wants to play Tyreek, and Tyreek could easily pop for 5 catches for 100 yards with a competent quarterback. Jalen Waddle could go for 4 for 60 and a touchdown with a competent quarterback. We're expecting Devin A-Chain to be involved. I'm not saying Huntley throws for 500 yards. I think it's reasonable to expect somewhere between 190 and 200, and one of these receivers to have a nice performance tonight.
I agree, and I like both sides of this game, and the injury report is going to be fascinating, and the Titans are most likely going to be without Jeffrey Simmons, and L'Jarius Sneed is questionable. So is Amani Hooker. 2 good starters in that secondary.
Happens every year for the Titans. Just have to keep pouring it out for them.
Every year. A week after Cheeto got put on IR. So they're missing Cheeto, CB number 2. L'Jarius Sneed questionable. Jeffrey Simmons most likely out. Tell you what, if Tyreek's coming in at half the ownership of St. Brown, I'm with you. And you can never call me biased. So, and you look at the other side here. Boy, offensive line. You mentioned Caleb Williams. I think the line is a lot, a bad situation there. Bill Callahan, even a magician, can't fix broken sometimes, and the right side of this Titans line has been awful. Yes, Will Levis has made a couple of really bad plays. The team could very well be 2-1, and that hurts me as well. But they're not. But he looked outside of the pick 6, which, of course, made all the news last week, completed like 75% of his passes, threw 2 touchdowns. He was fine. The Titans are passing at the second highest neutral rate in the league this year. And I think that's important. So if you believe that Miami can move the ball a little bit, Tennessee's going to have to counter somehow. And Miami, Seattle, and Detroit all are a little bit against the grain and are playing a little bit less of that 2 deep shell than the rest of the NFL seems to be. So I think there's definitely a chance of a couple of big plays in that game. We know Will Levis likes to push the ball downfield. We saw Calvin Ridley score on an end around a couple of weeks ago. So when you look at what the field is doing, and producer Steve was nice enough to pull up lineup HQ for tonight, on a 2-game slate, Tyreek Hill projected to be 33%. I mean, listen, it sounds like a big number, but on a 2-game slate, it's just not. Look at that big Amon-Ra St. Brown number that RotoGrinders has projected. Sure, you can make lineups with both of them, but man, I like the idea of Tyreek out wide and then maybe utilizing that Detroit ground game and, hoping that that's the way that Detroit's able to put up points. I think that's interesting.
Well, man, here's the other thing too. St. Brown's getting big ownership, and like he should. Don't get me wrong. Like St. Brown's got his starting quarterback, so we're not overlooking that. But I just think this is good leverage. Like Tyreek is still one of the fastest receivers in the NFL, and play design alone, Luch, could free him up. Like this is a guy that can run a mesh route.
The guy. Here's the guy, Chris Collinsworth. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. He could run a mesh route, Luch, and take this thing to the house. Like that Tyreek isn't just a bomb specialist. Like, yeah, if he gets behind the defense, forget it. Like you're dead. But I mean, he can take a screen to the house, slants, anything, you name it. Like that's who Tyreek is. That's why they paid him the big bucks. That's also why I feel like Tyler Huntley is there, right? Just get the ball in his hands. And Skylar Thompson, I think, in my opinion, was just having trouble getting the ball spread around. I think McDaniel's going to have Huntley ready. And I know I keep talking about Huntley, but we just can't overstate, Luch, like veteran quarterback presence. And we're not saying Huntley has started, 30 million games in the league, but he's been a backup. He sat behind Lamar Jackson. Like he's played NFL football in stretches. He's going to spread this ball around. He's going to be able to get the ball out. And if he can get it out, the points will come. The production will come. And so that's why I'm so adamant about the Dolphins offense, because we've seen them sputter the past couple of weeks, but I don't think we see that tonight.
No, and I'm telling you, the Tennessee is going to be in trouble. If Snead is limited, we'll see what his status is. I mean, even just losing Jeff Simmons, you're missing your second cornerback. Amani Hooker might not play. The Titans linebackers, as good as Ernest Jones is and Kenneth Murray, they're not coverage linebackers. They're downhill run stoppers. But they're north-south. So I worry about A-chain speed and some outside zone runs. I worry about some little screens and some tackling with some, practice squad corners being elevated and maybe a practice squad lineman for Jeffrey Simmons as well. I like the Waddle call too. I plan on multi-ender in this thing and some small dollar stuff. So my plan is just to value this game a little more on both sides than the public is. And for Tennessee, if you think Miami's going to move the ball, like I said, Tennessee's going to have to counter. It might not work out, but for a team that's still passing at the second highest neutral rate in the league, half of the line is really bad. And they drew two really good defenses in the first 3 weeks. I mean, we've seen enough to know the Bears are a really good defense. The Jets are a really good defense. Green Bay, I don't know. The jury's out on Green Bay, I guess. I'm willing to throw out week 1 in the hard field conditions against the healthy Eagles and whatever just happened to them against Minnesota at Lambeau. I also don't know. But I'm with you. I think, listen, and we're not sitting here and disregarding the second game. I just think for tournaments on a freaking 2-game slate, you have to be selective about where you're going to put that 70% Amon-Ra St. Brown in, right? I mean, like you said, Chief, the payouts are so top heavy. More times than not, you're going to lose money playing GPPs anyway. So, and we have tons of premium content here at RotoGrinders. I'm looking forward to reading it when we get off the show. And thanks, Steve, for throwing this one up. But when we talked about the Titans, Dolphins, you got anybody else from that game? My other thoughts is just one more quick one at you. At a tight end position that we talked about elite tight ends, who knows? Sam Laporta was dinged up. Maybe he practiced full. Maybe he's healthy. But I'm interested to see how Miami uses Jonnu Smith without Raheem Mostert being active. He was kind of in that, what did they call it? The F back position on the depth chart where we've seen him take a couple of carries in the past. They use him on some motion stuff. We know he's a yak guy. Secret little revenge game against his former team. Jonnu Smith at tight end might be the move too. So you got anything else on that game? And if not, we talked about the popular pieces in that Detroit-Seattle game, and lead me into that one.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jonnu. Once again, cheap stuff is always good at tight end. That's something we talked about there previously. Seahawks, Lions, obviously Amon-Ra's there. We see the Seahawks are, once again, they're undefeated. If you didn't, man, maybe you need to catch a little bit of data that our good friend Notorious from RG here threw out there in terms of, what slot receivers have done to Detroit so far this season. And maybe this spells something good for our good friend JSN. So you guys may want to check that out. Obviously, we expect this to be the competitive game. If we expect higher scoring, we definitely think it's this game. And Geno Smith's going to have to come to play tonight, Luke. So if they could get behind, anywhere near 14-3, 14-0, then I think we're going to see Geno Smith unleash the beast here. We've seen DK Metcalf just torch defensive downfield in back-to-back games. I'm talking about monster, 60-plus yard touchdowns. And so I like this game. I think you find ways to get creative around some of the Dolphins-Titans piece. I think that's how you win tonight, for what it's worth. I think you find ways to get these pieces in around the Dolphins-Titans. I think if you just stack this game up and then filter in an A-chain, I think that's what everybody's going to do. But if you stack up the Titans-Dolphins and filter in the other game, I think that's the road less traveled. And I think you can win a tournament that way tonight.
I know we're on a little bit of a time crunch, so instead of cramming in next Sunday's look ahead and, y'all can watch show XYZ and read a bunch of stuff all week. This is one of our last treats of having 2 Monday Night Football games, so I figured it was nice to spend a little more time on these 2 games instead of just trying to cram in next week. But we hope it's useful for you as well. I think one more interesting thing is for Detroit, Tim Patrick played 50% of the snaps. So if you're looking for a really yucky click, as you say, Chief, on a 2-game slate, I didn't look at his routes. I could probably bring it up, but the guy played 50% of snaps last week. And there's a reason they went out and got him. Tim Patrick, very productive, had a couple of really unfortunate injuries last couple of years, but There was a time in Denver not too long ago where they thought Tim Patrick was their Cortland Sutton, and they were kind of playing side by side as 1A and 1B. So super gross large field tournament click idea. Tim Patrick. Yeah. Of course, you might end up with a 0 with him. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Well, look, Luch, I know we're in look ahead. Why don't you take your favorite game of the week for next week? I take my favorite game. We'll combine those, and then we will ride off into the sunset for food for thought headed into week 5. I've got my favorite game of the week already. I don't think it's going to be obvious, but it very well could be. And if it does, then, I reserve the right to kind of change and evolve. I think one of the interesting things is you got two of these interesting. The Thursday night game is Bucks Falcons. So you kind of take away the Godwin, you take away London, you take away Baker, you take away Evans, you see what I'm saying? You take away Kirk Cousins, you take away Bijan. So like that game is out, right? Then the Jets-Vikings game is probably going to be out. So you take away, you're taking away Justin Jefferson, you're taking away Darnold, you're taking away, Aaron Jones. So I'm just looking at pieces. I'm bringing that up for a reason. Then on the Sunday night game, Luke, you've got Cowboys Steelers. So you're taking away Dak, you're taking away CD, you're taking away Najee Harris possibly in another nut spot for running wild on a bad defense. And then you got Saints Chiefs on Monday, and how are the Chiefs going to evolve without Rashee Rice? And then you got the Saints who we've been playing. So Alvin Kamara's gone. You see what I'm saying? So you've got big pieces this week, in my opinion, Luke, that are missing from the main slate. So what's your approach? What's your game? Obviously, there's still pieces left. Don't get me wrong. But I've got a game that I think I'm going to target just looking at it right now.
Okay, well,
what is your game?
This is our 1 million foot view on a Monday, and I'm looking at this for the first time, as I usually do on this show. I'm curious. I'm leading up to it. I'm curious to see Cleveland and if they bounce back. We talked about playing the other side of Washington. I was very tilted when Amari Cooper's 80-yard touchdown got called back. I had his over 51.5 receiving yards.
Oh yeah.
He was 4th in the NFL in targets leading up to the game yesterday. Deshaun Watson just stinks. I don't know what else to say at this point. But if he's going to do it, like our good friend Eric Beimfor said, Washington is like the Coors Field of wide receiver and defensive back matchup. So I'm curious to see how Cooper responds in that game. And Jaden Daniels, we talked about a lot. Not sure if that's going to be my go-to. Buffalo Houston is kind of screaming at me after what we saw yesterday, but I will come back to this. And I'm looking at DraftKings right now. It's only Monday. There's a little rain emoji next to this game. I don't know. But if Joe Flacco starts for the Colts, I'm going to stack the Colts and Jaguars. I don't know what Jacksonville's doing. I didn't look at the numbers after they were updated. But leading into yesterday's game, they were playing so much man coverage and so much non-two shell deep, just single high, that they're just doing exactly opposite of what the rest of the NFL is doing. And it shows because they're embarrassing and they got torched by Nico Collins. Not that it's not just because I'm a Titans fan. They fought really hard, but that defense is just a gold mine for opposing wide receivers. So if we think Joe Flacco is going to start, and if he can get Michael Pittman going, I wouldn't mind running it back with Brian Thomas, who looks amazing so far in his rookie year. So a little contingency plan there. I kind of like that game for points if Joe Flacco plays. And he's cheap.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's a good spot, and I do like that game a ton. I think I'm going back to the Texans offense again this week. And hopefully we're getting close to Joe Mixon return, which should only help this team. But look, man, my only concern is, do the Bills put up enough points for the Texans to have to push a little bit? And once again, I'm not going to write off Josh Allen after one bad game against what I feel like is one of the best teams in football. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm thinking he'll be able to manufacture and get his team down the field some. So I like that game. And in terms of a bonus, Luch, we talked about the Browns. I'm with you on Deshaun Watson. Like, he has not been right since he's come back to the league after that scandal and all the terrible things that he was accused of. It feels like those demons have been haunting him since he's come back to the league, right, Luke? Like, he just hasn't been able to get it together. But I think Browns Commanders. I think, once again, I'm going to Texans Bills because I like that game in a dome, controlled weather environment. We've seen CJ Stroud continue to put up monstrous passing yards even since week one. Like, he's the one quarterback loose that seems to be able to hit 250 on a regular basis or get close enough while scoring touchdowns. But the hottest team in football. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
The hottest team in football over the past 2 weeks has been the Washington Commanders. And now the Browns get to come to town against another secondary that they should be able to eat their hearts out of. Browns Commanders for me is going to be a game that target for sure.
One more, since it gave me a little time to actually look at this thing now. Green Bay in a dome. Jordan Love's second game back against the Rams, who've been beaten up in the secondary. And we didn't really spend time on the Vikings Packers. I wish we had all the time in the world, but did Green Bay ever come storming back in that game? Jordan Love had to throw the ball 50 plus times in his first game back. I guarantee that's not how Matt LaFleur and company wanted to dial it up, but that game, which looked dead for Green Bay, it turned into a fantasy goldmine. He had 34 fantasy points. He might be one of the chefs of the day. Jordan Love, 4 TDs, 3 picks. Christian Watson, an injury we didn't talk about. Hopefully he's okay. Can't see him playing, though, this coming week, and I think that just means a monster potential incoming role for Jaden Reed. So I don't
Christian
know
Watson, another one that continues to get hurt too.
Yes. Yep. So that's one I'm gonna have to look more into as the week goes on. So I like the Flacco-led Colts. I like Green Bay in a dome as of right now on Monday. And like I said, Buffalo, Houston, I'm kind of with you. That game is probably worth investing in. Anyway, I know you got to leave soon. Got any story time for us or any GPP for the day? What's going on?
Well, I do. We're going to go with story time. And I'm going to bring this back to my basketball team because, listen, Lou, today is our last day of conditioning workouts, stuff like that before the season. So in South Carolina, we have open season, and then we're about to head into dead season, which is going to be basically tomorrow, October 31st. I think through October 31st, and then November 1st, I think we can resume and we'll start tryouts and stuff like that. But I just want to say, for everybody out there that's a coach, whether you coach basketball, football, tennis, golf, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Just don't forget why you do what you do. And the reason you do what you do is for the kids. Don't ever let, that sneaky little devil by the name of ambition get in the way of why you really coach, right? You coach for the kids. And I know, when you see these college coaches, they get these big contracts. And I know, listen, they have a family they have to take care of, Luch. And so I'm not saying that those guys don't do it for the kids. I'm saying they kind of get the best of both worlds sometimes. The coach is at Washington and, his group is leaving and Alabama comes calling. He says, you know what? I like this challenge. And he goes down there. But if you listen to the Alabama players talk, they talk about the fact that this coach is bought in and he brings a certain swag, a certain culture. And so don't forget to do that for your kids, whether it's middle school, peewee, small fries, JV, B team, varsity, whatever. Coaches, make sure you do it for the kids. And I'm telling you, if you continue to pour in those kids, when these young men and young ladies grow up, they're going to go out in the world and they're going to have a positive impact on society because of the lessons you taught them through sports. So that's for all the coaches out there. Keep doing your thing, and always do it for the kids, man. And the reward will be great.
So I got something for you. I want to get the chat involved, and I know we have some of our longtime listeners tuned in, and maybe some new ones. But I'm headed to the ALDS Saturday, going to the Bronx for Yankees Game 1. Me and one of my oldest childhood friends. We don't get to see each other that much anymore. We're linking up, and we're gonna stay overnight because they didn't announce the time of the game yet, so we're just kind of winging it. And I don't know if you knew this, but in my early 20s, I lived in Brooklyn for a while too, which is much different than touristy Times Square, New York City, whatever. And I tell people, do not stay in Times Square, downtown, Broadway, whatever. And I was kind of hypocritical because we're taking a bus and it goes right into Port Authority. Super cheap, super easy. I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. Usually if I go back to Brooklyn to visit my uncle and my family and people I have there, I'll drive in because like Brooklyn's not a big deal. But we're going right into Port Authority. We're staying kind of close to like Times Square, which I never do. But Penn Station's right there, which you can get any line, any train, everywhere you need to go. So I thought, you know what? And if you ever were in New York City, or those of you that live in the area, every line runs different on the weekend and it gets complicated. I'm like, we'll just go to Penn Station, take a train to the Bronx, take a train back, easy, in and out. Don't have to pay for parking anywhere if we don't drive into the city, which you have to work some overtime that week if you want to pay for parking in New York City. But I want to hear from you guys. I know Brooklyn pretty well, but in terms of, like the Broadway, that area, Times Square, is there actually anywhere to get good pizza or good bagels? Because obviously that's the calling of food in New York for the most, at least in my eyes, is pizza and bagels. Unfortunately, we don't have really much good of either here in Pennsylvania. But every time I go back to Brooklyn or I have family in Long Island, I'm always bringing some carbs back with me, whether it's a dozen or 2 dozen bagels. I freeze some. I've been trying to watch the carbs, but there's no way I'm not going to New York City even for a night and not finding a good slice up there, Chief.
Yeah.
But I guess that's it. Producer Steve, big shout out. And what inning is that game in right now? I mean,
it's done. Actually, the Mets won 8-7. Good.
Oh, wow. So we have one game left, and the Mets the Mets are in. That's what it is now, right?
Yeah, the Mets are in, and so now the Braves have to win game 2 if they want to get in.
Wow.
If the Mets win both games, then Arizona gets in. And boy, I thought Atlanta, man, I thought we had it, but now Chris Sale is absolutely going to pitch. Like he will be pitching this game. Don't you worry.
Playoff baseball starts now, baby. I love it. I love it. What a great time of the year we have.
Congrats, Steve. I'm not a sore loser. Congrats to the Mets for getting in. They've played pretty well all season.
Here he comes. Well, Chief, I know you're a Braves guy, so best of luck to you and your support there for your team there. Hopefully, for your sake, Chris Sale. Bread is news now. I love that. I love that. Every time I try to watch my carbs, I'm like, man, I love a good loaf of bread. It's tough. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's it for us. Thanks for hanging out with us on this kind of unique edition where we were able to talk about 2 Monday Night Football games and hitting that reset button. Chief, where can the people find you on Twitter before we head out of here?
At Chief Justice 06, you can catch me during the week. Sometimes I'm on the RotoGrinders Today show with Blender. I've got the Blitz show on Fridays, and then I carry you to the finish line, to the end zone on Sundays with the Crunch Time show, and then we get back on the horse and do a little bit of showdown as we close out Sunday Night Football. So glad to come on and hang out with you. This has been a staple for a few years now, and hopefully we can keep bringing the heat to you guys.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm the Luch. Look me up on Twitter at the J Carlucci. That was producer Steve, who is very happy. And so for everybody here who loves carbs, bread, pizza, and the whole nine, we'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in.